December 1943. Spring. 1944. The ringing in his ears wouldn't stop. Oberwachtmeister Werner Kaufmann's eyes opened to gray sky, and for a moment he couldn't place where he was. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood, still warm, ran down his temple. The taste of copper and ash filled his mouth. Somewhere above, the distinctive whine of P-47 Thunderbolt engines faded into the winter air. He had been sitting at his radio station in a small cottage near Amiens when the fighters came. No warning from Luftwaffe spotters. The first he knew was the percussion of 50 caliber bullets punching through wooden walls. The radio operator beside him, Gefreiter Klaus Müller, 19 years old from Stuttgart, simply ceased to exist. One moment adjusting the frequency dial, the next scattered across the equipment bench. Werner's fingers had reached for the codebook, the precious leather-bound journal containing every cipher variation for the 1st SS Panzer Division's communications. It was still there, miraculously, buried under a collapsed ceiling. He held it to his chest like a child as American soldiers moved cautiously through the ruins, rifles trained on shadows. A young sergeant with freckles and winter blue eyes found him. The rifle barrel swung toward Werner's head. For a moment, death seemed certain. But the sergeant lowered his weapon when he saw Werner's raised hands. "Don't shoot," Werner said in careful English. "I am wounded. I am a radio operator. I have information." The sergeant looked confused. Other soldiers gathered. Someone said something rapid in English, too fast to follow. One soldier kicked the codebook away from Werner's chest and picked it up. His eyes widened. He said something like "Jesus Christ" and ran toward the ruins. 3 hours later, Werner sat in the back of an American truck, his left arm bound tightly. A tall, lean officer sat across from him, counterintelligence corps insignia on his uniform. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He rubbed his jaw unconsciously, a habit that suggested sleepless nights. "I am Captain Norman Woods," the officer said in German. "You are a radio operator for the 1st SS Panzer Division?" "Ja, Oberwachtmeister Werner Kaufmann." "The codebook, Wehrmacht cipher material?" "Division communications," Werner said. His voice sounded strange, hollow. "Frequency changes, call signs, radio procedures." Captain Woods leaned forward. His tired eyes studied Werner with clinical precision. "You understand what you're telling me? That codebook changes every 48 hours. An old one is useless. But you, a senior operator, you know things no codebook can teach. The patterns, the habits, the errors operators make." Werner said nothing. "The war is lost," Woods continued. His tone was flat, businesslike, devoid of sympathy. "Germany lost in 1942. It's only blood now. How much of it depends on whether we can end this faster." Werner turned away. 6 months in a British POW camp outside London. The compound held nearly 4,000 German prisoners. The air smelled of wet stone, coal smoke, and unwashed men. SS fanatics carved swastikas into their arms. Wehrmacht regulars spoke in whispers about surrender. Cynics had shed their ideology like old uniforms, now joking quietly with guards, working details, trying to survive the waiting. Werner watched. He listened. He said nothing. Letters from home came every 2 months, heavily censored. His mother wrote about bombing raids on Bamberg. His sister wrote from relatives' farmland. Then in March 1944, a letter from his brother Wilhelm serving as Gefreiter with the 1st SS Panzer Division on the Eastern Front. Wilhelm's letter was brief, military mail always was. But the words between censored lines spoke volumes. "The fighting here is beyond description. We do not advance, we merely survive another day. The men are exhausted. Some no longer care whether they see morning. I pray this ends soon, but I fear the end will come at great cost. More cost than Germany can bear. I think often of home, of normal things. Perhaps when this is finished, if I survive, we can have coffee together like normal people do." The letter was dated 3 weeks earlier. Wilhelm was still alive when it was written. He was still on the Eastern Front, still in the meat grinder that consumed German soldiers by the thousands. Werner sat on his bunk, holding the letter. His hands were shaking. Captain Woods visited Werner's cell in April 1944. No written notes, no cleverness. "Your brother is still alive," Woods said in German. "Wilhelm Kaufmann, Gefreiter, 1st SS Panzer Division. We have thorough records." Something cracked inside Werner. "He'll probably die," Woods continued. "Not from Russians specifically, but from the war itself. If it continues 2 more years, probability approaches certainty. If it ends this summer—" He paused, letting silence do the work. "Maybe 60% survival. More if Germany surrenders before the Russians advance too far." "You want me to help end the war faster?" Werner said. "Yes." "I would be a traitor." "Yes." Werner felt the weight. This American wasn't trying to make it easy. He was being precisely honest. "My family. We'll never know. Your work remains secret. Your name stays classified 50 years, maybe forever. When the war ends, you'll be returned as a simple POW. As far as anyone's concerned, you spent the war in a camp." If I refuse? Woods rubbed his jaw. You spend the war here. When it ends, the Soviets want specialists in German communications. We've informed Stalin about you. That conversation ends differently. 2 weeks later, a secure facility in central London. The transition from camp to interrogation room happened in a blur. A truck ride through rain-soaked streets, a basement office without windows, doors that locked from the outside. Werner understood he was now property of a different kind of war, the hidden one, fought with information rather than bullets. The interrogations lasted 12 hours a day. Cryptologists, military intelligence officers, men in civilian clothes who wouldn't introduce themselves. How frequently did operators repeat mistakes? What protocols governed emergency communications? What was the pattern of frequency changes? Which officers had identifying speech patterns? With each answer, Werner felt something inside him dissolve. Not his body, they fed him, treated him well, kept him intact. But something else. The part that had sworn the soldier's oath. The part that believed in honor and duty. That part was being worn away, methodically, like water wearing stone. On the 6th day of interrogation, Werner stopped eating. The food sat on the desk untouched. When the interrogators pushed, he simply stared at the wall where someone had scratched in crude German, "Every answer kills someone." He stared at it for hours. It was true. He knew it was true. With each frequency, each call sign, each operator's name, he was sending information that would be used to intercept German communications. Communications that would be decoded. Information that would lead to dead Germans. One of those dead Germans might be Wilhelm. On the 7th day, Werner's hands had stopped shaking. He picked up the pencil the interrogators offered. He began to write down everything. The frequency change cycles, the operator call signs, the officer voice patterns, everything. His handwriting was steady now. Cold. Professional. The handwriting of someone who had accepted that he was no longer German, no longer a soldier, no longer a man with a future. He was now only a tool, a translator of secrets, a man who chose one death over thousands of others, knowing that this choice would haunt him every day of whatever life remained. By the end of the interrogation session, his hands were trembling again, but not from fear, from the weight of what he had done. May 15th, 1944. The Decryption Center. The decoded messages arrived in stacks, 20, 30, sometimes 50 per day. They came from intercept stations across England, places Werner had never seen. They were read by cryptologists he would never know. And they all traced back to conversations he had about the Reich's most secret communications. Werner sat at a desk covered with marked maps. Red lines traced German unit movements. Blue lines showed Allied dispositions. The patterns had become his language, not strategy, but frequency. He could read the war in the spaces between transmissions. Captain Woods placed a decoded message in front of him. 1st SS Panzer Division. Position confirmed near Lisieux. Fuel consumption reports forwarded to headquarters. Frequency change implemented 1200 hours, 4710 and 6220 kilocycles. Werner's hands began to shake. The 1st SS Panzer Division. Wilhelm's division. 3 days old. We've already intercepted the new frequencies, Woods said quietly. His voice held something Werner hadn't heard before. Hesitation. We know where they're moving. We know when. We know the fuel situation. Where's this coming from? Werner asked, though he knew. From you. Woods rubbed his jaw, that unconscious gesture that suggested sleepless nights. The interrogations had stopped 3 weeks ago. Now Werner was simply placed at a desk with decoded messages, with maps, with the machinery of war turning around him. They didn't ask questions anymore. They just wanted him to see what his information was creating. The invasion comes soon, Woods said. Days, maybe. When it does, this will save Allied lives. Thousands. And German lives? Werner asked quietly. Woods sat down across from him. For the first time, he looked tired. Not professionally tired, exhausted. I have a brother too, Woods said. Infantry captain, Normandy beaches. I don't know if he survived the landings. The room went silent. So we're both in hell, Werner said. Yes, but our brothers still have a chance to survive. If the war ends faster, they both come home. Werner didn't respond. He understood that Woods needed him to believe this. He also understood that it was probably a lie, but it was a useful lie, so he didn't challenge it. June 6, 1944. 6:47 a.m. The Germans were panicking. That was the first sign that everything had changed. 30 men wore headphones in the listening room. Cryptologists, translators, signal officers. They heard the panic first, before the official reports reached command, before the propaganda broadcasts, before anyone outside the intercept stations knew the magnitude of what was happening. Command post under attack. Artillery from the sea. Where are the panzers? Cannot establish contact. Werner heard the frequency changes he had described, the call signs he had provided. Officers trying to maintain discipline while their units were being systematically destroyed. At 7:15 a.m., a transmission came through in the specific pattern of 1st SS Panzer Division. Reporting in. 3rd Company taking positions near Carpiquet. Enemy aircraft overhead. Requesting confirmation to advance. Awaiting headquarters. Werner recognized the voice. Major Klaus Drescher, Reconnaissance Battalion Commander. He had catalogued Drescher's patterns months ago. The Bavarian accent, the clicking sound between phrases, the way he always said Berichterstattung instead of Meldung. 7 minutes later, headquarters response received, advance confirmed, moving toward Juno Beach. 2 minutes after that, intercepted from an RAF squadron. Enemy formation spotted near Carpiquet. 6 panzers moving northeast, engaging now. Werner closed his eyes. Drescher didn't transmit again. By noon, 200 German transmissions had been logged, most fragmentary, most indicating chaos. But the pattern was unmistakable. The Allies knew where every German unit was moving. They knew when. They were waiting. Captain Wood stood behind Werner's chair for hours. He didn't speak. He just listened. Around 4 p.m., a photograph appeared on Werner's desk, shot from an RAF reconnaissance aircraft that morning. A column of German tanks burning on a Norman road. Panzers twisted into metal sculptures. Smoke everywhere. 67 tanks destroyed in the first 3 hours, Wood said. Most caught on roads we predicted. Roads we only knew about because of your information. Werner stared at the photograph. Your brother's division is at Carpiquet? Woods asked. Yeah. They took heavy losses today. Werner couldn't speak. The weight pressed down like a physical force, threatening to collapse his chest. June 10th, 1944. Late night. Werner found himself in the barracks assigned to him, a small room, sparse with a window that faced a brick wall. He hadn't slept in 72 hours. His hands shook constantly now. The tremor had become a permanent feature of his existence. At 2 a.m., someone knocked. Captain Woods entered with 2 cups of tea. Real tea, not the chicory substitute. He sat without being invited. You didn't have a choice, Woods said. You know that, right? You didn't have a choice. Yes, I did. I chose. Every day I choose to come to the intercept room. Every day I choose to translate the messages. Every day... Your brother would be dead anyway, Woods interrupted. If you hadn't given us the frequencies, he would still be at Carpiquet. He would still be in heavy combat. This... Woods gestured vaguely. This doesn't guarantee anything. It makes survival possible. It gives him a chance. Or it leads the Allies directly to the positions where his unit is concentrated. Woods didn't answer. You wanted me to understand what I've done, Werner said. That's why you put the photographs on my desk. That's why you let me hear the voices of men I knew. You wanted me to understand the cost. I wanted you to understand the alternative, Woods said. The war continues for another 2 years. Germany kills another 10 million people. Your brother dies in Siberia or Poland or Berlin. Instead of carrying that weight, you carry this one. You choose which weight you can live with. Werner picked up the tea. It was cold. I can't live with either, he said. Woods stood to leave. At the door, he paused. My brother's unit landed at Utah Beach. I heard him on an intercept about 2 weeks ago. Combat chatter, nothing official. He was alive then. I haven't heard his voice since. He closed the door quietly. Werner sat alone with cold tea and the knowledge that somewhere in Normandy, 2 brothers, one German, one American, might be fighting the same war from opposite sides, both carrying the weight of decisions they didn't make. August 1944, the expansion. The intercept room had doubled in size, more staff, more equipment, more frequencies to monitor. The war was accelerating now. Germany was being methodically dismantled. Werner had stopped trying to track Wilhelm. The 1st SS Panzer Division's communications had become a ghost frequency. Only occasional transmissions, usually fragmentary, usually indicating units reduced to skeleton strength. On August 12th, a message came through in a pattern Werner recognized immediately. Divisional Administrative Channel, the frequency used for casualty reports and personnel movements. Registry update. Gefreiter Wilhelm Kaufmann transferred to reserve status. New assignment pending, effective immediately. Werner read it twice, then 3 times. His hands had stopped shaking months ago. Now they had simply gone numb. What is it? Woods appeared beside his desk. My brother. Transferred to reserve status. That's good news. It means they don't have enough healthy men to keep him in combat, Werner said. His voice sounded strange, distant. It means his unit is broken. It means he's probably wounded or sick enough that they can't keep him in the field. Woods said nothing. Or it means he's dead and they haven't updated the records yet, Werner continued. In chaos like this, sometimes the paperwork gets behind. That evening, Werner walked to the window in his barracks room. The brick wall was still there. Behind it somewhere was England. Somewhere beyond that was France. Somewhere in France was his brother, alive or dead, wounded or recovered, he would never know. The war would end. He had known this for months. Germany had already lost. What remained was only the mechanism of defeat, grinding forward, consuming soldiers. Wilhelm was caught in that mechanism, so was Werner, but Werner had chosen to place his brother inside it. That distinction, that terrible, specific distinction, was something he would carry for the rest of his life. September 1944, January 1945. September 1944, the forward listening post. Werner was transferred to a new facility, a concrete bunker 10 kilometers behind the American lines in eastern France. The Germans called it the Siegfried Line. The Allies called it Opportunity. The intercept room here was smaller, more focused. Instead of monitoring all German communications, Werner's team tracked only one thing: movement patterns of panzer divisions, fuel consumption reports, and communication traffic that suggested coordination at the highest levels. By October, he understood. Another offensive was being prepared. The rhythm of the radio transmissions told him everything. The coded phrases, the frequency of status reports, the mentions of winter thunder and last offensive hidden in encrypted messages. He told Captain Woods. When? Woods asked. December, possibly late November. The frequency of fuel requisition suggests a major operation. The communication volume indicates coordination of multiple corps. They're talking about one final push. Your brother? Werner didn't answer. He didn't need to. Wilhelm was still alive. The last transmission had been in August. Reserve status meant he was recovering, probably being reassigned to a combat unit for one last offensive. We'll be ready, Woods said. Werner understood what that meant. They would decode the attack plans. They would position troops to intercept. They would know exactly where the German columns would advance, and Wilhelm would be in one of those columns. December 16, 1944. The breakthrough. The Germans attacked at 0530 hours. The first transmissions came through seconds after the artillery barrage began. Chaotic. Panicked. German officers trying to maintain discipline while their lines collapsed. Werner sat at his desk, headphones clamped to his ears. His hands had stopped shaking months ago. Now they simply remained numb. 1st SS Panzer Corps advancing. Breakthrough achieved near Lossheim Gap. Request air support. Moving toward Malmedy. That was the 1st SS Panzer Division, Wilhelm's division, the one they'd been waiting for. 2 hours later. 1st SS Panzer facing unexpected resistance. American forces appear well prepared. We expected breakthrough by 14 hours. Still unable to penetrate. Request additional support. By noon. Communications disrupted. 3 company commanders killed. Regiment commander assumed command of divisional operations. Casualties mounting. Air support not received. Where is Luftwaffe? The Luftwaffe never came, because they knew where it would come from. They knew the routes. They knew the timing. At 3 p.m., a message came through in the administrative frequency Werner had been tracking. Casualty report, 1st SS Panzer Division. Combat effective strength reduced to 40%. Multiple officer casualties. Casualties include Major Wilhelm Kaufmann, killed in action near Hansfeld, 11:47 hours, by artillery fire. Effective date 16th December 1944. Werner removed his headphones. The room continued operating around him, voices speaking into microphones, telephones ringing. Officers updating maps with symbols representing units that were being systematically destroyed. Werner stood. He walked to the window. Outside was France. Below was the war. Somewhere in that war, his brother was dead. He had known this was possible. He had even prepared for it, or thought he had. But preparation meant nothing. The knowledge changed nothing. Wilhelm was still dead. The information Werner had provided had still led the Allies to the exact positions where the 1st SS Panzer Division would concentrate. Captain Woods found him at the window an hour later. I'm sorry, Woods said. Don't be. I did this. I provided the information. I knew what it would mean. You saved thousands of Allied lives. Your brother understood. My brother understood nothing, Werner said quietly. He was a soldier. He did what he was told. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time because I told the Allies exactly where that wrong place was. December 17, 1944. The second offensive. The German attack continued despite the devastating first day. More transmissions, more failures, more casualty reports. Werner listened to them all. He decoded them all. He provided analysis for everyone. The 6th Panzer Army was failing to break through. American defenses were holding. The Germans had expected victory by now. Instead, they faced stalemate and attrition. On December 19th, Wehrmacht headquarters issued orders for a change in operational strategy. The breakthrough was no longer achievable. Fall back to defensive positions. Preserve remaining forces. The offensive was over before it had truly begun. On December 20th, Werner learned that Wilhelm's divisional commander had been killed in the first hours of fighting. The division's operations officer had assumed command. The 1st SS Panzer, one of the Reich's most elite formations, had been reduced to scattered companies and platoons trying to find each other in the chaos. That night, Werner didn't go to his bunk. He sat in the intercept room, listening to German soldiers dying in real time. Young men, many his age, screaming for medics who couldn't reach them. Officers calling for orders that never came. Supply units desperately trying to find units that no longer existed as coherent formations. Captain Woods came to him at 3 a.m. "You need to rest," Woods said. "Why?" "So I can dream about my brother being blown apart by American artillery positioned exactly where I said they should be." "Werner!" "Don't say anything," Werner interrupted. "There's nothing to say. I made the choice. I chose this. Every person who dies because of the information I provided, I chose that. And I chose to let my brother die so that more American soldiers would come home. That's the calculus, isn't it? That's what I agreed to?" Woods sat down. He looked as exhausted as Werner felt. "My brother died at Normandy," Woods said quietly. "June 17th, killed by a German sniper he never saw. I learned about it 3 weeks later in a casualty notification. I never heard his voice again, never said goodbye. The last thing I said to him was good luck before he boarded a transport. That was it." Werner said nothing. "I spent 2 months hating you," Woods continued. "I hated that you were safe in an intercept room while my brother was dying in a ditch in France. I hated that you'd betrayed your own country while I was already mourning mine. And then I realized—" Woods paused. "The only thing worse than losing him would have been if his death had been pointless. If the intelligence he was trying to act on had been wrong. If the sacrifice meant nothing." "But Wilhelm's death did mean something," Werner said bitterly. "It meant that my information was accurate. It meant I betrayed him successfully. Or it means you saved 100 American boys who will go home instead of dying in the Ardennes. Wilhelm was going to die in this war anyway. This way, his death bought something." Werner wanted to throw the cup of cold coffee Woods had brought him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to confess everything to someone, anyone, and be court-martialed and executed so that he could finally stop carrying this weight. Instead, he picked up the headphones again. January 1945, the final month. The German offensive had failed completely. By late January, the Wehrmacht was in full retreat. The territory they had gained in December was being surrendered. German radio traffic showed complete disintegration of command structure. Officers were fleeing. Supply lines had collapsed. Soldiers were surrendering by the thousands. Werner continued to monitor and decode. He provided information about German withdrawal routes. He helped the Allies position forces to cut off retreating columns. He contributed to the systematic destruction of the Wehrmacht. And with each decoded message, with each intercepted transmission, he was also unknowingly piecing together the final hours of the 1st SS Panzer Division. The unit that Wilhelm had served with was being dismantled piecemeal. Companies were being surrounded. Remnants were being forced to surrender or be destroyed. On January 28th, a transmission came through from a Wehrmacht medical officer searching for survivors. Search teams report finding personal effects of 1st SS Panzer personnel near Hansfeld. Attempting to identify casualties and return effects to next of kin. Request assistance in identifying Gefreiter Wilhelm Kaufmann. Effects located. No body recovered. Presumed killed in artillery strike. That was all. No more information. Just the notation that Wilhelm's personal effects had been found. A wallet maybe, a photograph. Something that had survived when he hadn't. Werner didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply sat at his desk and continued translating the next intercepted message. The war would end in 4 months. When it did, Werner would have provided the information that helped win it. He would never know if he could have won it anyway. He would never forgive himself for making his brother's death serve that purpose. But he would know with absolute certainty that the choice had been his, and that Wilhelm had paid the price for it. Word count. 2000. Chapter 4. The Silence After May 1945. 1990s, May 7th, 1945. Reims. Germany's unconditional surrender. Werner learned about the German surrender through the regular radio broadcasts, not through his work. By May, the intercept rooms were being shut down. The war in Europe was over. There was no more need to listen to German communications because there was no more Germany willing to transmit anything coherent. Captain Woods found him packing his personal effects into a canvas bag. "You're being reassigned," Woods said. "Pacific Theater. Japan is still fighting." "Your expertise?" "No," Werner said. "It's not a request." "Then court-martial me. Execute me. I don't care. I won't continue this. I won't help win another war. I'm done." Woods understood. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled strings that Werner would never fully comprehend. By June, Werner was being transferred back to England. By July, he was being processed as a prisoner of war for repatriation to Germany. Nobody asked him what he'd been doing. Nobody cared about the intercept room. The official record showed him as captured in December 1943, held in various camps, released as part of standard POW procedures. His real work remained classified. It would remain classified for 50 years. February 1945. An earlier moment. The camp liberation. Werner didn't know it yet, but his brother Wilhelm was still alive. In the chaos of the Ardennes offensive's collapse, the 1st SS Panzer Division's records had been confused. Casualty reports had been misfiled. In the confusion of retreat, Wilhelm Kaufmann, wounded, separated from his unit, captured by American forces, had been processed into a standard prisoner of war camp rather than being listed as killed. Wilhelm had been in an American POW camp for 6 weeks when the liberation came. He had been there, thin and hollow-eyed, when American soldiers discovered him among thousands of other German prisoners. Werner didn't know this yet. Nobody had told him. The 1st SS Panzer Division's casualty reports said Wilhelm was dead. That was enough. July 1946. The reunion. They met in a British camp in northern Germany. Two brothers who had been separated by war, now reunited in the chaos of post-war Europe. Wilhelm was skeletal. His left leg didn't work properly. Shrapnel from an artillery strike that had also killed 3 of his squad mates. He walked with a permanent limp. His hair had gone partially gray. He was 32 years old and looked 50. Werner was thin as well, but differently. Not from malnutrition, but from weight loss caused by stress and insomnia. They held each other. Werner cried. Wilhelm didn't. He was too damaged for crying. "I thought you were dead," Werner said. "I nearly was. Captured after the first day of fighting. Spent the rest of the war in a camp near Paris. But the casualty reports... confused records. I was listed as killed for months. Then I was captured and reclassified. By the time anyone sorted it out, the war was over." They stood together in the afternoon light. Two Germans who had survived a war they should not have survived. "What will you do now?" Wilhelm asked. "I don't know. I'm being released to civilian status. Germany is occupied. Everything is destroyed. We can get a place together. Bamberg, maybe. If it's still standing, we can try to find Mother." Werner nodded. They could do that. They could try to rebuild something from the wreckage. But Werner would never tell Wilhelm what he had done. He would never explain that the information he had provided had led to the deaths of thousands of German soldiers, including soldiers in Wilhelm's own unit. He would never confess that he had chosen to betray his country so that his brother might live. The knowledge would stay with him. It would be his alone. 1952. Bamberg. Ordinary life. They found a small apartment in the rebuilt section of Bamberg. Wilhelm got a job at a postal office. His leg never fully healed, but he learned to function with it. He married a woman named Margaret in 1950. They had 2 children by 1952. Werner worked odd jobs. Construction, warehouse labor. He never spoke about his wartime service. When people asked, he simply said he had been captured and spent the war in camps. It wasn't entirely a lie. He had been a prisoner of sorts. Just not in the traditional sense. He lived a quiet life. He had no wife, no children. He moved through the rebuilt post-war world like a ghost, present in body but fundamentally absent in spirit. At night he sometimes heard German radio transmissions, not real ones but echoes in his mind, voices of men long dead, frequencies that no longer existed, the weight of his choices pressing down like physical gravity. Wilhelm noticed. Of course he did. "You should talk to someone," Wilhelm said one evening over dinner. "A doctor, someone who can help with..." "There's nothing to help with," Werner said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since the war ended. You won't tell me what happened to you. You won't talk about where you were captured. You won't talk about anything that happened after 1943. Some things don't need to be talked about." "Some things need to be talked about," Wilhelm said quietly, "or they destroy you from the inside." Werner smiled. "Some things are more destructive when they're spoken than when they're kept silent." Wilhelm didn't push further, but he knew his brother was carrying something that had nothing to do with being a prisoner of war. 1990, the archives. A young German historian named Michael Steiner was researching the history of cryptography in World War II. He had been given access to newly declassified British intelligence documents. In a file labeled German Consultants, Post-Capture Intelligence Operations, he found a name. Werner Kaufmann. Steiner began researching. He found Werner Kaufmann living in Bamberg, retired from a postal service job, age 72. The meeting was awkward. "I know who you are," Steiner said carefully. "I've read the classified documents. I understand what you did." "I don't know what you're talking about," Werner said. "The Intercept Center, the decoded messages, the information you provided about German communications, the casualty reports that suggest your intelligence directly influenced Allied tactical decisions." Werner didn't respond. "You saved tens of thousands of lives," Steiner continued. "The Battle of the Bulge would have been catastrophic for the Allies without that intelligence. The invasion of France..." "I betrayed my country," Werner said flatly. "That's the only thing that matters." "You saved lives." "I killed my brother." Steiner was quiet for a moment. "Your brother is alive," Steiner said. "He's here in Bamberg. I saw him listed in the city records. Wilhelm Kaufmann, Postal Service, retired 1985. Werner felt something crack inside him again. After 45 years, it cracked once more. "I know he's alive," Werner said quietly. He doesn't know what I did. He thinks I was simply a captured soldier who spent the war in camps. He doesn't know that I provided the information that could have killed him 100 times over. He doesn't know that I made a choice, that I chose the death of thousands of German soldiers so that he would have a better chance of surviving. That's not how it worked, Steiner said. The war was already lost. Germany was already defeated. Your choice was between immediate defeat with fewer casualties or prolonged defeat with more casualties. You chose the former. I chose to betray my country. You chose to end the war faster. Werner looked at the young historian. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I'm not a hero. I'm not someone who made a difficult choice for the greater good. I made a choice to save my brother's life, and that choice happened to also serve the Allies' interests. But the motivation was personal, not noble. The results are what matter, Steiner said. The results don't matter to me, Werner said. I can't live with what I did. I haven't been able to live with it for 45 years. Epilogue, 2005. Werner Kaufmann died on March 15, 2005, age 87. The cause was listed as lymphoma, but those who knew him understood it was simply that the weight had finally crushed him entirely. Michael Steiner published his book, The Voice in Shadow: How One German Radio Operator Changed the Course of the War. The book was well received in academic circles. Werner's name was finally known. His contribution was finally recognized. But Wilhelm was never told the truth. He went to his brother's funeral thinking Werner had been a captured soldier who had suffered through the war and never quite recovered. Werner was buried in a small cemetery in Bamberg. The stone reads simply, Werner Kaufmann, 1918, 2005. Beloved brother. There is no mention of what he did, no recognition of the thousands of lives saved by his intelligence, no acknowledgement of the terrible choice he made. Only Wilhelm knows that beneath this stone lies a man who carried an unbearable weight in silence, who loved his brother more than his country, who spent 45 years trying to atone for a choice that could never be atoned for. In the end, perhaps that's all that can be said about war. That it requires choices that no person should have to make. That the cost of victory is always borne by someone, and that some weights, once carried, can never be set down. They can only be carried to the grave. Actobi.